This week on Personally Speaking, my guest is Senator Mike Rounds, United States Senator from South Dakota. Please stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Msgr. Jim Lisante, and Senator Mike Rounds joins me now. Senator Rounds is a Republican senator from South Dakota who was sworn into the United States Senate on January 6, 2015. Senator Rounds serves on 5 committees in the U.S. Senate: the Senate Armed Services, Banking, Housing and Urban Affairs, Indian Affairs, Veterans Affairs, and the Select Committee on Intelligence. Senator Mike Rounds previously served as governor of South Dakota from 2003 to 2011. And from 1991 to 2000, he was an elected 5-time South Dakota State Senate. In 1995, his colleagues selected him to serve as Senate Majority Leader, a position that he held for 6 years. During this time in state government, Senator Rounds was committed to growing the economy, keeping taxes low, and strengthening South Dakota families. He earned a bachelor's degree from South Dakota State University, where he met his wife, Jean. Senator Rounds is a lifelong South Dakotan, the eldest of 11 children. He's the proud parent of 4 grown children and 10 grandchildren. He's here with us today to talk about the issues that matter the most to him and the values that sustain him, especially his faith. Joining me now, I'm so pleased to welcome to Personally Speaking, Senator Mike Rounds. Senator Mike Rounds is our guest on Personally Speaking. Senator, I want to talk with you about something that's in some ways a follow-up. Earlier in the year, we had Vice President Mike Pence on, and then more recently, Senator Josh Hawley. And the question I asked them, and actually I talked with Tom Cotton about years ago, was, you know, and I know that a life in politics is not easy, and that there are so many things that are a distraction. So how, when you've been both governor and senator, as well as state senator, how have you managed to keep the two balanced? Family life, which is so important, and this public life where so much is demanded of you. What's your secret for somehow or another making it all work?
I remember asking the same question of a former governor in South Dakota. His name was Bill Jankel, and he was the governor before I was. And I asked him one evening, I left a call for him, and I said, look, I'm thinking about running for governor, and I'm just really concerned. I've got a wife and 4 kids, and I've got a business. Can a guy keep everything running with the family, with all the things you need to do, right, and still be effective in this role as a governor? And he says, well, he said, I'm a micromanager. You're not. He says, you need to delegate and you'll do it. Next question.
Wow.
And, I think that's part of it. I think there's 2 parts to it that I'm concerned about and I try to follow up on regularly. The first part is I do expect my team, and every Senate office has a team. I expect them to do work, but I delegate the questions. If I've got something that I need to get done, I delegate it. But then I have to remember to follow up on it. And that's my responsibility. So I try to work it in a fashion that once I've given a direction to someone that, look, we need to look at this, get me the information on this, get me the homework on it.
Right.
And then I follow up, where's that at? And, is it coming? And so forth. But that's been very helpful. The other piece of this is that I don't look at working either as a governor or working in the United States Senate as a member. I don't look at it as a position. I look at it as a job. Now, working as governor was the greatest job in the world. And working as in the United States Senate is kind of like being, on call, so to speak, where you're leaving home, you're going to Washington for 3.5 days a week. You're putting in your time there, and then you're coming home again to be in your state and with your family. And so I kind of look at it as I want to keep it that I'm not taking a position. I'm taking a job. And right now it's a full-time plus job, but it's a job.
Yeah. Let's go back in time. You are the man you are. You are the person you are because of where you come from, your family of origin in so many ways. So, Joyce and Don, your folks, when you look back now as both a father and grandfather, what did your parents do right in raising you?
They they recognized the most important parts of things, which was family
Mm-hmm.
and faith. We made mass every week. And not only do we make mass, but we took part in religious educational opportunities. You make your first Fridays. Remember those?
Yeah, sure.
All of us made our first Fridays. That was mom's really big concern. But it said something about this faith that was there. My dad always reminded us that, look, things get tough once in a while, but the good Lord is never going to give you more than you can handle. And I think that's a strong part of this. There has to be a faith that comes with all of this that says that there's a reason why you're here in the first place. And you may never know what that purpose is, but there's a purpose. And each of us has that role to play in bringing things together. And so for me, it's just a matter of keeping that, always at mind is we may not know what our role really is.
Mm-hmm.
But when given the opportunity, we need to do what we think is right. And I think the thing that I've always wondered is given the opportunities that I've had, have I used those tools, those gifts that the good Lord has given me? Have I used them correctly? Have I used them the way that it was expected to be used? And
Mm-hmm.
the fear then that you have with that is if you're not doing it and you think you should have, what's wrong with this attitude? If you think that you were that good that you would never fail, and now you get into some of the deadly sins, and
Yes, right.
and that's part of it is you've got to do your best, but if you don't, it's not because it's because I should say it's because you are not perfect,
Right.
and sometimes you get reminded of that.
Senator Mike Rounds is our guest from South Dakota. These issues are, in some ways, my people always say they're intractable, and I don't think anything is intractable, but they're tougher when we're as divided as we are. So let's look at a couple. Do you see any path as a United States Senator to fixing our incredibly broken immigration system?
I do. Look, first of all, there's a difference between legal immigration and
Right.
illegal immigration.
Yep.
I believe in legal immigration, and in fact, our country needs legal immigration. On a practical side of it, we don't have enough kids. We're not producing enough kids.
Right,
Our
right.
total fertility rate in the United States today is about 1.64. We have to do 2.1. In other words, 2.1 live births per woman just to break even on our population. We're not there. And so just to fulfill the jobs that we need to fill, we need new people coming into the country. But the second part of this, and actually Angus King, who's an independent out of Maine, Angus and I agreed to front a bipartisan proposal back in 2018. And we thought we had a pretty good proposal laid out. We were going to actually build the wall. We had not only authorized it, but we appropriated $25 billion for the wall, the security system down along the border, the whole bit, and for cleaning up the entryway so it was easier for people to get in and out through the legal means down there.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going to do the same thing on the northern border. But we also went after an issue called chain migration as well, which is where if you allow someone to legally come into the country, then they, by law, by current statute, could then invite others to legally come into the country. And so what you ended up with is if you allowed one person in, that would, by chain reaction, bring in other individuals, which meant more people standing in line would be restricted because of the total number that we allow per year. So we had to address that as well. And I thought we did a pretty good job of that. We also provided a path forward for these kids that have come in that some people call dreamers.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that we did that is to say that, look, if you're here in the country, you were brought in, you were underage at the time, you can earn your citizenship over an extended period of time. And that during that time, you can work, you can go to college, you can join the armed services and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought we had a pretty good approach to it at that time. But it takes a consensus that says it's the right time, and you've got to have an administration that supports you as well in that endeavor. And folks on both sides of the aisle have got to say, look, we didn't get everything we wanted on this, but it's better than the current status quo. And that's
Right.
what a bipartisan approach looks like.
Yeah, and we're not having much of that going on. Tomorrow I'm interviewing Max Boot, who wrote a definitive biography of President Reagan, and I was surprised, because my sympathies lie with Republicans so often, that he was a very popular Republican president who did find a path to get people into the country legally and to make it work. So it's doable, and you tried with Angus King. Now, the other intractable issue, and you hear about it all the time, and it's definitely wounded a lot of my Republican friends, is this issue of abortion. I just talked to a congressional candidate who was always pro-life, and then suddenly in this campaign, he's sounding very weak on the issue because he said, I can't win on the pro-life point of view. And I'm just wondering, because I obviously believe with all my heart and soul that we can give people certainly some of the access they need and some of the exemptions that we need, but that to go with the Democratic platform of a 9-month right to abortion and have the government pay for it is butchery, and it's insane. Now, as a pro-life senator, can you be pro-life and not suffer terribly right now? Because it seems as if there's this wave of people who are embracing the pro-choice point of view. People may hate abortion, but they want access. What are we supposed to do about that, Senator?
I think there's a couple of different thoughts that have to be always in the back of our mind. Not number one, what the Catholic Church has taught, and I think it is a marvelous approach, and in fact, I think what the papal direction has been in terms of Humanae Vitae and the path forward there, it is correct. And I think there are three things that you always want to do. Number one, you're looking for what you can do to save as many lives as possible.
Right.
That includes the unborn child, and it includes the mother. The second piece on this is that you have to recognize that the individuals involved in this are struggling, and you have to show compassion, and you have to provide them with some thoughts about what you would do to take care of them and to help them. And that sometimes is lost as we talk about our pro-life movement. And the other piece on this is to recognize that that young lady or that lady is going through one of the most tumultuous experiences ever. And you have to understand and to be a part of helping it for her specifically. So you have to take care of and look at the mother and the family in terms of the challenge that they have. But included in that family is that unborn child. Now, I believed that Roe versus Wade was wrong. And I believed it was wrong because it was an arbitrary item defined by the federal government at a time in which, when we talk about life, most life issues are decided at the state level. I've always said that I thought that the states were the laboratories in which good law would eventually be developed. I still believe that. And I think what you're going to end up with, because this is such a technical issue as well, I think what you're going to end up with, if we do it correctly, is to allow the states individually to start working their way through this process. In South Dakota, we had a trigger law, which I had signed into law when I was governor. And in it basically said that abortions are illegal with the exception of saving the life of the mother. Now, we knew that if we ever had a time in which Roe versus Wade was overthrown, that it would put the pro-life community in a strong position to negotiate with others who wanted more exceptions. But it started at that position of a very strong pro-life position. I still think that's the right place to start. But you remember, and I go back to one other. I remember, and I just most recently in our gospel readings within the Catholic Church, we talk about the fact that Jesus had been asked about divorce, and so forth. And Jesus said the only reason why, at that point, as a Jewish man, the only reason why we had divorce and that Moses, the lawgiver, had allowed for divorce was because of the hardness of your hearts.
Yeah.
And he didn't say that Moses was wrong, but he said the law, here is Moses, the lawgiver. And what they had done was because they needed a path forward. He did not say it was the right moral path, but he did not challenge what Moses had done in the law. And so for me, I think this is the part where if you want to save lives, You have to be able to write a law which will have long-term the effect of saving as many lives as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And so with that, when you have the questions of rape and incest and so forth, that's when you want to look at what the courts determine as to be a reportable rape and incest, which should be reported as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so each state will look at that, and then the courts are going to start defining what those look like. We talk about the life of the mother, and then we talk about the health of the mother.
Yeah.
But when you start defining the health of the mother, that's going to be a very, very serious issue, because health can be defined, and in some cases it's defined as familial relationships, and it's defined as to how she feels and her mental status and so forth. And you got to be really careful how you do those things. So I don't want to see those things like in South Dakota. There's a proposal to put basically 9 months of legal abortions in our Constitution. I don't want that at all. But I do think that you have to allow for a discussion among reasonable people about what the law should say, even if it is not as morally exact as what you might very well find in the Catholic teachings.
Senator Mike Rounds is our guest from South Dakota. You know, there's two things you said, Senator, that were so on target. One is, and I say this to my Republican friends who are running all the time, they have on the other side, you know, reproductive freedom, pro-choice, and women's rights, and that's fine. But we almost never mention the baby. One of the first things you did in answering my question was to mention that there's two people involved in every abortion. There's the woman making that very difficult decision, and there's a baby that's growing inside her. The other thing you said, which is so on target, is it's not enough to say abortion is wrong unless we're also willing to say, and we're going to help you. This past weekend in my church, we had a man who runs Good Counsel Homes come and say, look, any woman of any race, any religion, any economic background, we will give her up to 2 years to live in our homes and babysit and let her have job and education, because she's making a choice, but she has to have support in that choice. And that's just what you're saying, which is really, really wonderful. And I just wanted to ask you this too, and I think we have a mutual friend in Bishop Carlson who said this so often, that one of the other issues that's burning in America right now, and you know it because every time we hear of these school shootings, we go through an examination of conscience again. What do we do about the fact that we have as many guns as we do, and sometimes falling into the hands of people who should not have them? Now, I'm sure South Dakota, unlike New York, where I live, is a state where people have a warm affinity for the Second Amendment and want to believe that it's our right to carry arms. But what do we do about the violence? What do we do about the killing that happens in our schools? Senator, I'm sure you've been asked this before, but I'm intrigued. You're a man of wisdom. You've been around for a while as governor and senator. What are we supposed to do about this spike in violence?
It is one of the challenges that is going to be perhaps one of the most difficult things that we have, because you're talking about trying to stop someone from doing an evil deed, but you may not know that he's planning on doing it or she's planning it. And in this case, it's, you start looking at the profiles. It's in many cases a young man, withdrawn, clearly having mental challenges. And we don't do a good job of identifying those individuals to begin with, or following up with them. Look, you've heard the adage that it's not the person, it's not the gun that kills, it's the person that has the gun.
Right.
And the thing that really concerns me with so many folks, and I mean, I've got good friends that say, you know, you can do more with regard to limiting gun ownership and so forth. And we do some of that now. But the individuals that would plan on doing this type of a crime probably aren't going to be looking to see whether or not they're legal in getting their gun in the first place. So what you have are legal people have more restrictions on them, but the person that is looking at carrying out a crime really doesn't care about the law anyway. So I think it's not so much writing more laws restricting guns as much as it is identifying and helping individuals that have illnesses, mental illnesses, that are identifiable early on. I think over the next couple of years, we're going to be able to do more work with regard to mental health than what we've ever been able to do before. In part, and this may sound crazy, but I think with artificial intelligence, we're going to be able to look at more data sets. We're going to be able to identify, not so much saying someone is going to commit a crime, but more along the lines of, for mental health, identifying individuals that may very well be going through any type of a mental health crisis, including trying to hurt themselves. And that's something that I think the church should be involved with, talking about and promoting, that we need to do whatever we can to help those individuals that have these challenges. And I, I don't think most of us can imagine a person in their right mind that wants to go out and hurt a whole bunch of people. And when you start talking to terrorists, it's a different deal.
Right.
But for mentally ill individuals, for those individuals, we have to be able to identify them and to do it without taking away their personal rights and freedoms, but getting them help if at all possible. And I'm not sure that there's ever a time in which we will always be perfect in stopping somebody from doing, a terrible thing. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be trying to save lives. And once again, the same as I talk about when we talk about the issue of being pro-life and abortion, we want to save the life of the mother and the life of the baby.
Yeah,
once again, here, we want to save the life of the young man or woman that may be going through a mental issue, and we want to save all those other lives that could be in jeopardy because of their mental illness as well.
Senator Mike Rounds is our guest. And Senator, I promise this will be my closing question. I know you have a busy schedule, but we talked about the mom and dad who raised you and the 11 kids in the Rounds family, but I want to talk a little bit about, before I came over to do this interview, I was doing a wedding for Claudia and Paul, and my question to them, and they wrote me an essay before the wedding, was, of all the people in the world, why is this the one? How do you know this is who you're supposed to build your life with? Your beautiful wife, Jean, is in heaven now, but when you look back on those early years when you guys were courting each other, what was it about Jean that made you say, I think I can build a life and a family with this woman because she has qualities that I'm looking for? What did Jean have that made you say, I'll take that leap of faith and marry?
Well, I would be less than honest if I didn't tell you that physical attraction is a huge part of it, but it was her eyes. The first thing and the thing that I still think about more than anything else are her eyes.
Wow.
Second part on it was she had a calmness about her. And I felt as though she had a commitment to me, and I needed to have that commitment to her. It was a calling. And, I had thought, is it the right time to get married? Is it really the right thing to do? And all that kind of stuff. But it kept coming back to the same thing. It was, you look into her eyes and it was like, I get it. And at the same time, I had total trust in her, that she had confidence in me. And that connection, I think, is what draws people together, a sense of trust,
right?
A sense of peace between the two, that, you can share things together and you don't have to worry about whether or not it's going to be, given out freely and talked about with all of our other friends. It was between us. And I think that's really what drew me to Jean. And I got lucky because she chose me. I didn't choose her.
Well, that's a good thing that mutually you were picking each other. Senator, I thank you for being on, but I got to ask you, because you're a man of faith, I'm a man of faith, but this experience of loving people deeply, profoundly, and losing them, no matter how much faith we have, your loss of Jean, her battle with cancer, how do you put perspective on loss? And I know we'll meet her again, but in the meantime, the process of grieving, how in the world do you manage that? Because you've got this public life, but you also have a personal wound in your heart. I know everybody has a personal perspective on this. Do you have any insight into how do we move forward from losing the people we love most in the world?
I have to go back just a little bit, but let me just share it. When we lost my mom, my dad was concerned. We still had kids at home, and I was concerned about Dad. And Dad found a wonderful woman in Rosemary Scarborough who had just lost her husband within 6 months or so of when Dad lost Mom. They got together at a grief counseling session put on by the Catholic Church. And within about a year after we lost Mom, Dad and Rosemary got married. I wouldn't have had my dad for another 30 years if he would not have found Rosemary.
Okay.
And that says something about the need to be together, to have someone. I think when I look at my loss of Jean, I don't know that loss goes away, but I think over time you find ways to accept it, knowing that she's clearly in a better place after the pain and suffering that she went through with a sarcoma cancer. But the rest of us are here on earth and we have a life to live yet. And there's a reason why we're here yet. There is a purpose. Sometimes I think all of us wonder what that purpose is. And I think part of that just goes back to having a faith that there is an afterlife, that there is a God, and that God knows a whole lot more than we'll ever be able to understand. Doesn't mean we don't wonder, but just to know that the good Lord knows about it and this is their plan, and we have to have the faith that they are going to take care of us.
I want to thank Senator Mike Rounds for being with us on Personally Speaking. Senator, this has been a wonderful conversation. I appreciate your insights, obviously, into the issues of our day, but also your understanding of the absolute beauty and power of family living from your own parents, as well as your life with Jean, and importantly, your faith that has obviously undergirded so much of who you are, the values that you treasure. I so appreciate you being with us and Personally Speaking, and wish you many more years of public service, because we need good people to serve, and you are that good guy. So thanks so much, Senator.
Well, thank you. And having grandkids, and I've got 11 of them now, and knowing that what we're trying to do is to make things better for them makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah. Amen to that, Senator. Amen to that. Thanks for being with us on Personally Speaking. If you need to reach me for any reason, you can do that at personallyspeakingpodcast@gmail.com. You probably listened to this program on the Catholic channel, 129. And you can do more than that. You can watch it as well on YouTube if you like by searching under Personally Speaking with Monsignor Jim Lisante. We're also on Facebook at Personally Speaking with Monsignor Jim Lisante. We're on Instagram at Personally Speaking Podcast. Please share and let others know about Personally Speaking. I'm delighted to serve as host and executive producer at Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jandovitz. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.